My name is Michał Gołębiowski-Owczarek, which is long enough to not fit in many web forms. I'm a software engineer at Asana. We're hiring, of course. And I've been a jQuery core team member since 2013, so it's almost 13 years at this point. And this is going to be a quick 20-year story, as jQuery is 20 years this year. Why jQuery existed originally, how the platform caught up, and why it's still actively maintained, and why it even got a new major version this year, actually. Doesn't work? It does. OK, it doesn't switch here, though.
We'll fix it behind you.
OK, cool. OK, so let's go back to the beginning first. In 2006, the DOM was pretty painful. There was a lot of browser fragmentation, different event models, add event listener versus attach event, different CSS models, get computed style versus element current style, a lot of other differences. There was the need for variables DOM traversal and manipulation, since there was no query sector all anywhere, and later at least not in all browsers that you had to take care of. And it was pretty common to write the same thing for multiple browsers multiple times. So the jQuery's promise was to compress this into a small, consistent API that you only write once. That's how the slogan originated, write less, do more. But this wasn't the only way jQuery revolutionized writing web apps. The real invention was also the programming model, that you work on collections, not individual elements. There is chaining as a composition mechanism and more powerful event handling. For example, we still have no native event delegation in 2026. The Ajax and effects module became kind of optional to use later, but they were also huge back then. Eventually, the platform caught up, although I'd argue partially. A lot of what jQuery popularized is now available as web APIs, like Query Sector All, many DOM APIs. Their browsers converged on common web standards. And for new apps, were using jQuery less and less frequently. But that doesn't mean that jQuery became irrelevant. So these are some examples of how the platform caught up. The append method was backported partially, although it only supports nodes or text and not full HTML. And a lot of other APIs like before, after, and many others. But jQuery still had set semantics and chaining. For example, if you had to perform the same operation on multiple matched nodes, natively you still have to use a loop. So what jQuery still adds even nowadays? The set semantics by default do something for all matched elements. There are a lot of input normalization. You can fire a method on an HTML string, on an element, on a jQuery object, on an array of elements. A lot of APIs support various input types. There are composable workflows. You can chain across DOM, events, data, and this gets really small if you need to operate, especially on multiple elements. And there are still some compatibility behavior tweaks where the platform is still a bit quirky. When we released jQuery 3.0 10 years ago, we acknowledged the reality that the role of jQuery is changing, and that was done by creating the separate Slim build. So you are able to compile your own copy of jQuery with some modules excluded for a long time, but that's kind of a low-level use case. We wanted something that's easier to use. So we created a separate Slim build that excludes the Ajax and effects module and modules. And why these two? Because there were a lot of Ajax libraries and more created every day. Ajax was kind of also pretty separate from the rest of jQuery. And for effects, you can do a lot more performance stuff nowadays with CSS transitions, animations, web animation API. And if you have some complex use cases, then there are more dedicated libraries like GSAP. And we saw that even some web frameworks back then that were depending on jQuery weren't actually depending on these two modules. But does anyone still use jQuery nowadays, even this Slim build? Let's look at the data. So if you think that everyone has already migrated, then have a look at this chart. This is the build with website that shows usage of various libraries and frameworks. And you can see the data here from just a few years ago, but even expanded to today. Still, more than 70% of top 1 million websites have jQuery loaded on them. You can see the usage is generally growing. There is some drop at the end. I'm not sure if this is the difference in counting or if it really drops, but it's still huge anyway. And for comparison, these are stats for React, which is supposedly everywhere. It's like 20%. So the conclusion is that a lot of us is living in a bubble. The web is way more diverse than we usually notice in our daily professional lives. But these are some external stats. Let's also look at the data that the jQuery CDN collects. jQuery has its own CDN, which is pretty unique. Currently, it's handled for free by Fastly. We wouldn't be able to match this, to handle this traffic by ourselves. You can see that it started around 2008-09, and it's been steadily growing. So not only it's growing, but the growth doesn't even slow down, which is maybe surprising. And this is the comparison to other CDN providers that are popular, like CDN.js, JS Deliver, Google-hosted libraries. So jQuery CDN has 17% of that usage. And this is current data from February this year. And that has its consequences because of this massive, because jQuery is used everywhere. It requires special considerations. So we try to, we care a lot about the library size. If you submit a pull request and it adds 100 bytes to the minified gzip build, we still consider whether it can be made smaller, or maybe this particular change is not needed in jQuery core and can be supported as a separate plugin. Because everything we add will just get loaded in all those websites, slowing down the page loads for everyone. We also consider backwards compatibility because of this massive usage. So we do make breaking changes from time to time, although it took us 10 years right now. But even when we do them, we consider how easy it will be to migrate. And we take special care in making migration easier, for example, by maintaining the jQuery migrate plugin that warns you if you use some of these old APIs and brings them back for the migration period. So we've talked why jQuery is still relevant, but why did we actually release a new major version that has some breaking changes? So one reason is to make it more modern, to remove some long deprecated APIs, for example, ones that are natively supported and are totally not needed, drop some legacy browsers. That both decreases the library size, but also increases, it makes maintenance for us easier. We also excluded more modules from the Slim build. For example, the deferreds module. It's more common nowadays to just use native promises. We did some spec alignment changes and also security improvements. And let's talk about that last part for a moment. So trusted types is a web platform feature that's pretty new. It's been in Chrome for a while, but only recently other browsers started being on board. And the idea is to fix one of the most common XSS problems on the web, which is that even if you use TypeScript, both text and HTML are both strings. So if you don't capture the intent when capturing user input, whether it's going to be used for text or HTML, you can introduce XSS issues. And if you use the trusted types API, then you're not supposed to assign raw strings to inner HTML. You should use the special policy object with its create HTML method that creates some special object that keeps this HTML under a hood. You can hook up some sanitization process inside. And if you set CSP properly, this setting raw strings to inner HTML will actually throw. So what did jQuery have to do here? We had to stop concatenating raw HTML strings in the library, which was kind of needed to support some of the weird semantics for table elements. So we are now doing this differently. And that's a nice part of this API that you can support it without actually using it. So we talked about jQuery 4, so now jQuery 5. Let's go look into the future, why we would release another breaking change. So historically, because of some browser quirks, especially in IE, jQuery was doing more. In the event module, to work around browser bugs, jQuery attaches a single event handler. If you attach multiple click handlers to a single element, it actually attaches one. And the queue is kept internally. And we also implement our own event propagation when you trigger events. And that was to work around some browser bugs and get closer to the spec. But to support passive event listeners and some other flags, we do need a separate add event listener call per every handler added. So that requires a pretty big refactor of the event subsystem. And for the selector module, the way jQuery works right now, we do some minor modifications to the passed selector and try to pass it through QSA. If it fails, then maybe it's because it uses some jQuery extensions, and then we just do a completely manual DOM traversal. So we want to make QSA a hard dependency and just fill in those parts that are jQuery specific, but in general don't re-implement the whole thing, which has its own gains, because if we do it this way, then newer CSS features are automatically supported without us having to do changes to the library, which is not the case right now. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.